Hello once again everyone, and welcome back. I've returned with another guide, but this time around things are going to be a bit different. Every section that follows the introduction has received a complete rework. You'll find new visuals throughout, and things will now move at a smoother pace, but rest assured there is more information and progression than ever before. I'd love to hear what you think. Now let's kick off the rework with the Poisonous Concoction Pathfinder. Deliver death with volley after volley of exploding, poisonous flasks, and disintegrate everything in your path with the power of Plaguebearer. With strong and consistent offensive performance, a fairly smooth and enjoyable playstyle, affordable, flexible gear, the ability to run just about every map modifier, and at least in my iteration, a swath of defensive layers, notably including pseudo-max attack and spell block, strong armor, and strong evasion rating, full elemental ailment immunity, and much more. It performs well in every mode, levels quickly, transitions smoothly into maps, and can go as far as you're willing to push it. This build will get the job done. If you want to hurl flasks all over Rayclast, stick around as I break down how to make it happen. So let's get started by taking a look at the core of the build. Poison is an ailment that deals chaos damage over time. When you hit something and inflict a poison, the strength of the resulting poison is equal to 30% of the base chaos damage dealt. Unlike Ignite or Bleed, poisons can be stacked without limit on a single enemy. With investment, an incredible amount of poisons can be stacked at once, achieving phenomenal DPS. We'll be inflicting poisons with Poisonous Concoction, an unarmed exploding projectile attack that deals chaos damage. It consumes available charges from our life flask to add even more chaos damage. Having an optimal life flask is very important. Adding projectiles to Poisonous Concoction results in overlapping explosions that each inflict separate poisons. Shotgunning single targets many times per attack, our very best way to scale boss damage. Adding gem levels matters a lot to Poisonous Concoction, significantly improving its base damage and flask scaling. The duration of our poisons, how quickly we can dish them out, and how effectively we can shotgun all contribute to the strength of our boss damage. Plaguebearer is our secondary skill. It's mainly used to clear trash mobs and boost our damage against bosses. It has two modes. While incubating, it lowers our poison damage, storing some of it as plague value. Just a couple throws of Poisonous Concoction will normally max it out. Once you've accumulated some plague value, you're ready to switch to infecting mode. While in that mode, it won't lower our poison damage and deals DPS equal to 12% of the total plague value at activation, damaging everything nearby until the plague value is completely depleted. Withered is a debuff that applies 6% increased chaos damage taken, a form of more multiplier that can stack up to 15 times on a single target, boosting our damage output immensely. Withered can be applied with Wither Totems, Withering Step, or several other options. The method is up to you, but Withered must be accounted for in some capacity. Our auras and mana are both solved with a single item. The Devouring Diadem grants the use of Eldritch Battery, causing our energy shield to protect our mana instead of life, where it can then be spent on skills, reliably solving our mana problems, while also allowing us to reserve all of our mana, something the Devouring Diadem is more than happy to help with, increasing the reservation efficiency of socketed gems by a full 25%. Into the Devouring Diadem, we'll be placing 3 50% reservation auras from the options of Grace, Malevolence, Determination, and Purity of Elements. My core recommendation is to run the 3 defensive choices. However, any of these can be swapped out for the power of Malevolence should you deem that a better choice. In the 4th socket, place an Enlighten support. With the Charisma cluster, its corresponding Mana Reservation Efficiency Mastery, and the Grace Mana Reservation Efficiency Mastery, we can even find room for Herald of Agony or other alternative auras in a different setup. The higher Enlighten's level, the more auras you can cram in. With the core mechanics and skills discussed, let's take a look at our Ascendancy of Pathfinder. I recommend beginning with Master Toxicist, which effectively provides 20% more poison damage across a large sample size, and heavily improves clear speed, specifically for Poisonous Concoction, by allowing its poisons to proliferate, spreading across packs, and cleaning up stragglers. Next, I'd go for Nature's Reprisal, which once again increases the potency of our poisons, and increases the area of effect of Poisonous Concoction, Plaguebearer, and Withering Step, improving overall clear speed and shotgunning potential significantly. Up third, we've got Nature's Boon, which provides a constant flow of charges and occasionally free flask usage, allowing us to utilize flasks much more effectively than any other Ascendancy. And finally, we've got Knockoff Onslaught. It may not be name brand, but it still works. Now let's take a look at our endgame skill trees, which will follow a progression like this. Our only keystone is Versatile Combatant, which lowers our maximum chance to block attack and spell damage to 50% rather than 75%. For every point of attack block over 50%, we'll be granted 2% spell block, effectively turning 75% attack block into 50% attack block and 50% spell block, an advantageous trade-off in one of our best defensive layers. These are the new masteries that we'll be making use of. Every single one has an important role to play, improving the strength of our poisons and plague bearer, bolstering our defenses, ensuring we can hit consistently, and enabling the use of more auras. There are also some compelling alternatives, many of which are conditional or require additional investment, but are worth consideration. In a similar capacity, there are other types of optional investment on the skill tree, including heavier spell suppression investment, additional frenzy charges if you're running specific items, 30 strength and intelligence nodes to help meet attribute requirements, heavier attack block investment for Versatile Combatant, and extra sources of life flask charges if you find yourself running out a little bit too often. Our investments, both on and off the skill tree, are comprehensively listed here, a great place to check if you feel you've forgotten something. We'll be using a variety of jewels across the skill tree, many of which will be flexible rares, primarily featuring 3 or 4 of the gold modifiers, resulting in strong examples like these. Eventually, one of the slots can be upgraded to a Watcher's Eye, an aura-based jewel with a compelling array of modifiers to choose from. The kind of modifiers you look for will depend on the market, your budget, and the auras you choose to run. Find a solution that works well for you. An optional Brutal Restraint in one of these 2 sockets can potentially be very powerful. Within its area, it adds dexterity to minor passives and adds 1 randomized modifier to notables. The modifiers chosen are determined by the jewel's number and its exact position on the skill tree. The name on the jewel doesn't matter to us and should be ignored. A good result will feature several of the listed modifiers, especially those in gold. Jewels will need to be tested until you find a good result. For time efficiency, simply divine a jewel you already have, or for cost efficiency, buy and resell jewels until you find a good one. Finally, we've got the cluster jewels. I recommend following a progression like this, starting with your first large cluster, following up with 2 medium clusters, before optionally wrapping up with a second large cluster. Large clusters will be chaos damage focused, have ideally 8 passives or 9 on a budget, and feature 3 of these notables, with a heavy emphasis on Unholy Grace. Medium clusters will have a damage or chaos damage over time focus, and should feature either 4 or 5 passives. The result will be the same. Look for 2 of the listed notables, with a strong focus on Circling Oblivion and Flow of Life. For our bandit selection, I recommend killing each of them, helping Aramir for the 2 passive points. Our Pantheons are very flexible and will vary depending on your selection of auras. Here's a base idea for how to set up your keybinds. There are no impossible map modifiers to worry about, just a couple that can be annoying. Finally, here's a roundup of build-specific and general tips to keep in mind, such as turning off auto-equip in the settings to avoid becoming armed. During general gameplay, try to stay on the move and engage from a distance when necessary. Poisonous Concoction will be used consistently for clear. Plaguebearer will play a secondary role by obliterating weak packs and cleaning up stragglers. Activate Withering Step right after switching to Infecting mode for a fantastic speed and defense boost. Try to keep your flasks up, this should prove easy as a Pathfinder, and be sure to actively use your life flask for quick recovery. When facing the usual boss, just pop your flasks, switch to Infecting mode, and stack up poisons until they're done. In some cases, placing totems may help speed things up. When facing a dangerous opponent, in the few moments before the fight begins, place your 2 Wither Totems and 1 Ancestral Protector nearby. Swap over to Infecting mode. Activate Focus and any buffs or vol skills you may be using. Pop your flasks and begin the first barrage. Stack up as many poisons as you can before things get risky. Better to reposition, continue the attack from a different spot. Once you've inflicted enough poisons, your job for the phase or even the fight is likely done. Focus on avoiding damage and finish the fight safely. Leveling the build is extremely straightforward, mostly because Poisonous Concoction has such good scaling and base damage, without even requiring a weapon. Use any basic setup you like from level 1 to 12. I have a few listed here. From level 12 onwards, I recommend switching directly into Poisonous Concoction, slowly assembling the primary elements of the build. Use Withering Step and Plaguebearer to tear through zones, self-cast Despair, and run any auras you like. A combination of Malevolence, Herald of Purity, and Clarity will help you get to maps quickly. Make use of Wither Totems if you'd like, temporarily run a cast when damage taken a Mortal Call, and be sure to run a movement skill. Here's a progression of leveling skill trees. Some of our early masteries are very powerful and should be prioritized. Poisons inflicted on non-poisoned foes deal 300% increased damage. This is as incredible as it sounds and makes leveling far smoother. The mana reservation efficiency, poison duration, maximum plague value, and increases to life are also all worth having early. Utilize the usual cast of leveling uniques. Run 1 to 2 Quicksilvers, 2 life to help sustain charges. Upgrade these often as you level. Run a mana flask if needed, and if not, run a utility flask of some sort. Now let's take a look at our endgame gem setups, beginning with our Poisonous Concoction 6-link, designed to inflict many powerful, long-lasting poisons with each attack. Prioritize getting a level 21 Poisonous Concoction, as well as a Divergent Poisonous Concoction for the fantastic source of Withered. Slowly incorporate Awakened support gems, especially a level 5 Awakened Void Manipulation, as it adds another level to Poisonous Concoction. Up next, a 3-link, featuring some of our secondary skills. You can choose to increase their area of effect, or instead increase their level with Empower, raising Plague Bearer's maximum plague value. You can even run them unsupported, and instead socket Herald of Agony or another minor aura here. Prioritize getting a level 21 Plague Bearer, while also on the lookout for a Divergent Plague Bearer for the increase to poison damage while infecting, as well as an Anomalous Withering Step for the extra withered stacks. Our 4-link aura setup was already discussed in the build basics. In a nutshell, place 3 50% reservation auras directly into the Devouring Diadem, alongside an Enlighten support. Your main decision here is what auras you'd prefer to run. Next, we've got our unlinked utility skills. Molten Shell scales off of our armor to provide a buff that takes 75% of incoming damage for a short time, incentivizing defensive investment. Flame Dash simply helps us move around and avoid incoming damage. Ancestral Protector is used against bosses to massively increase our attack speed while the totem is active. Finally, Blood Rage grants attack speed and consistent frenzy charges on kill. Annoyingly, it also drains our life and can be easily dropped if you'd prefer, especially if you have another source of charges. In its place, you could consider running Herald of Agony or another minor aura. Consider looking for an Anomalous Blood Rage for the occasional frenzy charge when hitting a boss, as well as the Phantasmal Ancestral Protector for additional buff effect. Our final setup is also the most flexible. I enjoyed running a full Wither Totem setup, using spell totems to cast Wither automatically at nearby threats. By using multiple totem support, this can be ran alongside Ancestral Protector. For me, this was an effective and low-stress solution, but if you're comfortable using solutions like Withering Step and Divergent Poisonous Concoction to apply withered stacks, the entire setup can be dropped. In its place, you could find room for other minor auras like Herald of Agony and Defiance Banner, while also expanding other setups, like adding Empower to Plague Bearer. And with that, we've arrived at our final section, the endgame gear. Because we use a flask for a weapon, let's begin there. We want to maximize the life recovery number on the flask, best accomplished with the prefix, increased amount recovered, and reduced recovery rate. Try to get the highest roll you can, and be sure to quality this flask first. The suffix is flexible, but shoring up bleed and corrupted blood immunity here is heavily recommended. For the other 4 slots, we have a variety of options. Some can be filled with magic flasks, mainly a Quicksilver for speed and a Jade for evasion. From there, you can choose different suffixes. I recommend increased armor, evasion rating, or attack speed. Increased armor is especially relevant, as it powers Molten Shell. We also have a few powerful uniques to consider. Witchfire Brew is a great source of despair early on, but should eventually be replaced. Rumi's Concoction provides a ton of the armor and attack block we need so desperately for versatile combatant. I consider it to be nearly required. Dying Sun lowers the fire damage we take and grants area of effect and additional projectiles, likely increasing the total overlaps per attack. Finally, we have Taste of Hate, which converts some of the physical damage we would take into cold damage, while lowering the cold damage we take as well. Full equality whatever you select, and use Instilling or Enkindling Orbs to modify your playstyle. Now let's take a look at the shields. Early on, run a solid rare or an affordable unique like Leper's Alms. Over time, work in several of these strong defensive modifiers, with your main focus being attack block and spell suppression. A very optimized shield should look something like Step 3, with fantastic life, block, evasion, and spell suppression. A shield featuring socketed gems have increased mana reservation efficiency, can serve as a pseudo-replacement to Devouring Diadem, though you will have to deal with mana issues again. Unless you don't, you could begin with a solid rare or affordable unique. before eventually picking up a Devouring Diadem. Look for one that has a good veiled modifier, ideally being increased duration of ailments you inflict while focused, which provides you with a new skill, an instant cast, duration-based buff that will allow you to stack up far more poisons on a boss, or you could secure needed attributes or resistances instead. Alternatively, you could instead run a rare that, in addition to the core modifiers from step 1, also features several of the green modifiers. As you continue to upgrade, look for an enchanted Devouring Diadem or an even more optimized rare. The best options are arguably the Plague Bear Multi and Plague Value Effectiveness, but if you can secure anything helpful, that will be more than enough. Now let's talk body armor. Begin with a solid rare, Tabula Rasa, or a corrupted 6-link with the correct socket colors, eventually upgrading to one of these unique choices. Cherubims is fantastic all around, and my top recommendation for most players. There are many other alternatives to consider. In a vacuum, the Brass Dome would be the absolute best. It is unbeatable defensively, but needs to be well rolled and brutally off color. If you can get your hands on a good one, absolutely run it. As you continue to accumulate currency, eventually upgrade to a corrupted unique, featuring 1 or even 2 of these corruptions, especially those in red, as they will heavily increase Poisonous Concoction's gem level, a substantial damage boost that should be prioritized. At high levels of optimization, look for a rare that features 2 or even 3 of these modifiers. Our gloves will begin as a solid rare or an affordable unique like the Embalmer. Eventually upgrade to a more optimized rare, featuring several of the green modifiers, primarily Chaos Multi, attack speed, and spell suppression. Alternatively, with investment into frenzy charges, Snakebite is a really solid choice offensively. Eventually secure an extremely optimized rare, Corrupted Snakebite with Despair on hit, or another max frenzy, or even something like Asenath's Gentle Touch for explosions and temporal chains on hit. Step out of your Wanderlust boots into a solid rare. Eventually upgrade to an Itsiri Step, an incredibly versatile unique that you can run all the way through the endgame if you'd like, or you can eventually upgrade to a very optimized rare. No matter what you stick with, be sure to enchant it. Although there's nothing too incredible, the attack speed and stun avoidance are both good choices. Our first amulet will be a solid rare, shocking I know, before upgrading into a more optimized rare featuring at least one of these powerful offensive modifiers, the best being +1 level to Chaos or Dexterity gems, as this affects both Plague Bearer and Poisonous Concoction. Of course, a high roll of Chaos Multi never hurts either. Alternatively, you could run a Despair-based Impresence, a really solid overall amulet. At the very high end will be a rare that features 2 or even 3 of these mods. Alternatively, you can run a Whatever Uprising, an incredibly strong amulet that can make one of our core 50% auras completely free, allowing us to run all 4 simultaneously. Once you've got an amulet you're fairly happy with, be sure to anoint it. By far and away, my top recommendation is Corruption, which dramatically increases the power of Withered and consequently our boss damage. There are a few conditional alternatives to consider, but the vast majority of players should run Corruption. Don't forget to use catalysts to get the most out of your amulet. Our rings will once again start off as decent rares. As you upgrade over time, mainly focus on securing more of the core modifiers, while also incorporating some of the green modifiers if you'd like. Most notably, curse enemies with Despair on hit, a very convenient source of the curse. I heavily recommend securing it here. If you found room for Herald of Agony and can free up a ring slot, I advise running a Circle of Nostalgia, a strong ring that features random implicits and 2 random Herald of Agony modifiers, improving things like chaos damage, chaos resistance, and Herald of Agony reservation and buff effect. I recommend a combo of chaos damage and resistance. Although less important, implicits can still be very strong. Use the list on the right to find something good. Try to find a ring with the right modifiers that's well rolled and ideally also has good implicits. If you don't get Despair on one of your rings, you'll want to secure a curse elsewhere, and again be sure to use catalysts. Finally, that brings us to the belt. Early on, just run a decent leather belt, before eventually upgrading to a Stygian Vise, allowing you to run an Abyssal Jewel, featuring some of the modifiers listed on the far right. Although very flexible, I recommend securing the chance to gain phasing on kill, which makes general mapping with Plaguebearer far smoother. As you continue to optimize, work in several of these green modifiers, and once again use catalysts. If you've got so much currency you can't even find your map device, be sure to use a Headhunter or Mage Blood, though you probably didn't need me to tell you that. And that concludes just about everything. I really hope you enjoyed the guide. Please let me know what you thought of the rework, and consider all the usual stuff, liking, subbing, and Patreon. You know the deal. This rework took a lot of time up front, but it laid the groundwork and should save significant time going forward. My videos have always been about quality over quantity, but we need a few more videos than this. I'll be working as hard as I can to make that a reality, one step at a time. Thank you to everyone who has continued to support the channel, especially my patrons. You guys have been incredibly patient, and I'll do my best to reward that. Special recognition goes to Adam Benamias, Agent Leo, Andrew Miller, Bloody, Chris IRL, Christopher Cravey, Damian Jagnandan, Dan Wayne, Evan Jones, Gareth Thomas, Greg Wells, Hunter Wild, Ichiro Naimi, Jacob Davey, John Gabriel, Luke C. Nasivera, Lukash Galik, Lizzie Burns, Ma Camille, Matthias Frankovist, Mocha Madness, Modimus Prime, Nate, Piotr, Rasmus Blockpelsko, Ravager Nick, Ray Hill, Sebatan Babylon, Spencer Wright, Tony G773, Varos Vitale, Xi, and finally Svin. Thank you so much everyone. And as always, I've been Esero, and I will see you guys in the next one.